September 1944. A small village in occupied France. 37 SS soldiers, elite troops of the Third Reich, march in formation down a narrow country road. They are armed, battle-hardened, and absolutely certain of their superiority. Within 2 hours, every single one of them will be prisoners, captured not by Allied commandos or armored divisions, but by farmers, by bakers, by a village that wasn't supposed to fight back. This isn't a Hollywood fantasy. This is declassified history. And the story of how it happened reveals something far more dangerous than any weapon: the fatal arrogance of invincibility, the Waffen-SS. The name alone was designed to inspire terror. These were not ordinary German soldiers. They were the ideological vanguard of the Nazi war machine, selected for physical prowess, political fanaticism, and ruthless efficiency. By 1944, SS units had carved a blood-soaked path across Europe. They were responsible for massacres at Oradour-sur-Glane, where 642 civilians were murdered; at Malmedy, where American POWs were gunned down in cold blood; at Toul, where 99 men were hanged from balconies as collective punishment. The SS didn't just fight wars. They waged campaigns of systematic brutality designed to break the will of entire populations. Their reputation was their weapon. Villages that resisted were erased. Partisans who fought back faced torture and execution. The psychological calculus was simple. Submission meant survival. Resistance meant annihilation. By the autumn of 1944, this calculus had been proven across 1,000 burned villages and mass graves. The SS were invincible, not because they couldn't be killed, but because no one dared try. Or so it seemed. The village of Étobon sat in the rolling hills of eastern France, a cluster of stone houses and narrow lanes that had existed since medieval times. Population, 287. Strategic value, none. It had no rail junction, no major roads, no military installations. It was the kind of place armies marched through and forgot. But Étobon had something the SS didn't account for. It had Mayor Henri Ferté, a 52-year-old former artillery officer from the First World War, a man who understood that wars are won not by the strongest, but by those who see what others overlook. And Ferté had been watching. For weeks, he had observed German patrol patterns. He noted their routes, their timing, their casual arrogance. SS units moved through the countryside in small detachments, confident that their reputation alone would guarantee compliance. They traveled light, without heavy support, because they believed they didn't need it. Ferté saw the vulnerability hidden inside that confidence. The SS were predictable. They followed roads, they kept to schedules, and most critically, they assumed the French had been beaten into passivity. That assumption was about to cost them everything. September 27, 1944, 0430 hours. A German motorcycle courier races through Étobon with urgent news. An SS detachment, 37 men under the command of Obersturmführer Klaus Becker, will pass through the village at 800 hours en route to reinforce positions near Belfort. They expect breakfast, fuel, and no trouble. Ferté calls an emergency meeting in the church cellar. 18 men gather, farmers and tradesmen, none younger than 40, most veterans of the previous war. They have 12 rifles, 8 shotguns, and a collection of hunting weapons that would be laughable against a trained military unit in open combat. Ferté doesn't plan open combat. He plans something the SS tactical manual never anticipated: architectural warfare. Étobon's main street is barely 4 meters wide, lined with 3-story stone buildings that create a natural corridor. Ferté had walked this street 10,000 times. He knew every doorway, every window angle, every sight line. He knew that the buildings created interlocking fields of fire. He knew that the street had only 2 exits, and both could be blocked. He knew that if you could trap a force in that corridor, their training, their weapons, their reputation would mean nothing. The mathematics of the situation were brutally simple. In open terrain, 37 SS soldiers would annihilate 18 villagers in minutes. But in a stone corridor 4 meters wide, with no room to maneuver, no cover, and no escape, the equation reversed. Ferret wasn't planning an ambush. He was building a killing box. The preparation was methodical. At 0500 hours, 2 farm carts were positioned at each end of the main street, loaded with hay and positioned to look abandoned. Beneath the hay, logs chained together, creating mobile barricades that could be dragged into place in seconds. At 0530, shooters took positions in 2nd and 3rd floor windows, each assigned a specific sector of fire. No one was to shoot until Fertet gave the signal. At 600, the village baker lit his ovens. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the morning air, a calculated detail designed to suggest normalcy. At 6:45, children were sent to the fields outside the village. The elderly were moved to cellars. At 7:30, Fertet positioned himself in the window of the mayor's office, overlooking the street. He held a hunting rifle and a whistle. The plan required perfect timing. If the SS sensed danger before entering the street, they would deploy tactically, and the villagers would be slaughtered. If the barricades were moved too early, the Germans would simply reverse course. The window of opportunity was measured in seconds. 1 mistake, 1 nervous shooter, 1 barricade moved too soon, and everyone in Étobon would die. 7:58 hours. The sound of boots on cobblestones. The SS detachment marches into Étobon in a standard road column, 2 abreast, rifles slung casually over shoulders. Obersturmführer Becker walks at the front, scanning the village with the bored confidence of a man who has done this 100 times. They see the baker's shop, the open shutters, the morning routine of a defeated population. They see exactly what they expect to see. They don't see the ropes attached to the hay carts. They don't see the men in the windows. They don't see the trap closing around them. The column advances into the street. 10 men, 20, 30. All 37 SS soldiers are now inside the corridor. Fertet raises the whistle to his lips and blows. The sound shatters the morning silence. Instantly, villagers at both ends of the street haul on ropes. The hay carts lurch forward. The logs beneath tumble into the road, blocking both exits. The SS freeze for exactly 1.2 seconds, the neurological delay between perception and reaction. In that instant, 18 rifles appear in the windows above them. Fertet's voice cuts through the confusion, shouting in German, "Drop your weapons or die where you stand." The SS are trained for combat. They are trained for ambushes. But they are not trained for this, for a situation where every tactical option has been eliminated before the fight begins. They cannot advance. They cannot retreat. They cannot take cover. The stone walls offer none. They cannot suppress the shooters. The windows are too high, too many, too well positioned. They cannot fight their way out. The barricades are solid, and the exits are covered by overlapping fire. Becker reaches for his sidearm. A single rifle shot cracks from above, striking the cobblestones 2 centimeters from his boot. Fertet's voice again. "The next one goes through your skull." The mathematics are inescapable. 37 men, trapped in a corridor, with 18 rifles aimed down at them from positions they cannot assault. The SS reputation, their training, their ideological fanaticism, all of it is irrelevant. Physics and geometry have rendered them helpless. At 0801 hours, 3 minutes after entering the village, Obersturmführer Klaus Becker drops his weapon. One by one, the others follow. 37 SS soldiers, the elite of the Wehrmacht, surrender to a village of farmers without a single shot being fired in anger. The villagers moved with grim efficiency. The SS were disarmed, bound, and locked in the church cellar. Ferté immediately dispatched a runner to the nearest Free French Forces position, 14 kilometers away. By 1100 hours, FFI fighters arrived to take custody of the prisoners. By 1400 hours, Allied intelligence officers were conducting interrogations. What they discovered was staggering. Becker's unit was carrying detailed maps of German defensive positions around Belfort, radio codes, and intelligence on minefields and artillery placements. One sergeant had a complete roster of SS personnel in the region, including names, ranks, and unit assignments. The intelligence haul from Étobon was described in Allied reports as operationally significant. The maps alone allowed American forces to identify weak points in German lines, leading to a breakthrough that shortened the Belfort's campaign by an estimated 11 days. The radio codes compromised German communications across the entire sector. But the real value wasn't tactical, it was psychological. Within a week, the story of Étobon had spread through the French resistance network. A village, not a commando unit, not an army, had captured an entire SS detachment without firing a shot. The myth of SS invincibility cracked. Other villages began to resist. Partisans grew bolder. The German command, analyzing the incident, issued new directives. SS units were no longer to travel in detachments smaller than 50 men, and were to avoid narrow village streets entirely. This single engagement forced a reallocation of German manpower at a time when every soldier was desperately needed at the front. The operational cost of one village's defiance rippled across an entire theater of war. Ferté was later awarded the Croix de Guerre. The citation was brief, bureaucratic, almost dismissive, for exceptional initiative in the capture of enemy forces. He returned to his position as mayor. He died in 1953, his obituary in the local paper running just 4 sentences. None of the 18 villagers became famous. Their names appear in no history books. The lesson of Étobon isn't about heroism. It's about the fatal flaw hidden inside every system built on intimidation. The assumption that reputation alone can substitute for tactical awareness. The SS were a formidable fighting force in open battle, but their psychological warfare strategy created a vulnerability. They relied on fear to suppress resistance, which allowed them to operate in small, unsupported units. This efficiency became fragility the moment someone refused to be afraid. Ferté understood something that military theorists would later codify: that the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with superior firepower, but the one who changes the rules of engagement entirely. He didn't fight the SS on their terms. He created a battlefield where their strengths were irrelevant and their assumptions were fatal. Modern asymmetric warfare doctrine, from urban combat training to counterinsurgency strategy, incorporates this principle. Control the terrain, dictate the engagement parameters, and even a vastly superior force can be neutralized. Today, in the Étobon Village Museum, there is a single artifact from that September morning, one of the ropes used to pull the barricades into place. It's frayed, unremarkable, the kind of hemp cord you'd use to tie down a load of firewood. Next to it is a faded photograph of 18 men standing in front of the church. Ordinary faces, work-worn hands, no uniforms, no medals. The placard reads simply, September 27th, 1944. 37 SS soldiers walked into a village that morning, certain of their dominance. They walked out in chains, defeated not by an army, but by farmers who understood that invincibility is always an illusion, and that the most powerful weapon in any war is the willingness to see what everyone else has overlooked. The crack in the armor isn't always visible, but it's always there. If you want to see more stories of ordinary people who changed the course of history through ingenuity and courage, reinforce your defenses by hitting that subscribe button. And if this story breached your expectations, deploy a like to support the channel. Because the best intelligence is the kind that gets shared, and history's greatest victories often come from the most unexpected places.